According to NEP 2020, outcome-based education has to be implemented in all the colleges and universities in India. Outcome-based education includes curriculum design incorporating the course learning outcomes, CLOs. OBE also includes the instructional strategies and assessment of students' performance in perfect alignment with course learning outcomes. All the assessment tools must be used in order to assess the students' level of attainment of the learning outcomes. In this background, I shall share a few of my thoughts on learning outcomes based assessment. Let us first understand different kinds of assessments. Formative assessment. Its goal is to monitor students' learning in order to provide ongoing feedback. This feedback enables instructors to improve their teaching and students to improve their learning. Then summative assessment. Its goal is to evaluate students' learning outcome at the end of instructional units or course. Then diagnostic assessment. It assesses the students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge and skills prior to instruction of a given course. It is important to test the prerequisite knowledge of the students necessary for following the instruction of the current course. Then we also have criterion referenced assessment. It measures a student's performance based on mastery of a specific set of skills and or knowledge. The student's performance is not compared to other students' performance on the same assessment. The examples are sessional test, mid-semester exam, end-semester exam. These exams must be designed to determine the level of mastery of the material presented in specific units or the entire course in terms of the learning outcomes of the specific units. We call unit level learning outcomes or course learning outcomes. Friends, only criterion referenced assessment is valid in outcome-based education. In outcome-based assessment of learning of students, absolute grading of performance of students must be done in this kind of assessment. If any college or university does a relative grading of performance in outcome-based education, that is wrong. Then we have norm-referenced assessments. It measures a student's performance in comparison to the performance of same class of students on the same assessment. When I say same class, doesn't mean of a particular college, even in the entire country with the same qualification. Normative scoring is based on a bell curve, meaning only half of those tested can score above the 50th percentile. The examples are GATE, JEE Mains, NEET and other competitive exams. In all these cases, a relative grading of students' performance is done. Then let us discuss now the important principles of assessment, sir. Principle 1. When we talk about outcome-based assessment, we must do only criterion referenced assessment, as I have already mentioned. That means assessment should be done to the extent that every student must achieve a threshold minimum of each learning outcome to pass the course. It measures a student's performance based on mastery of a specific set of skills or knowledge or both. Then formative and summative assessment both should be incorporated into teaching learning process appropriately to ensure that the purpose of assessment is adequately addressed. Then we have, as I have already mentioned, diagnostic or pre-instruction assessment. It is important for the teacher to know the prerequisite knowledge of the students necessary to understand the present course content. For that purpose, the teacher has to conduct a written test on the prerequisite knowledge. Then he can fill the gaps by review in the first 2 or 3 classes and then proceed to the instruction of the present course. Principle 4, validity. Sir, assessment should be valid. Validity ensures that assessment tasks and associated criteria effectively measure students' attainment of the intended learning outcomes at the appropriate level. Then principle 5, reliability. Most important, sir. Assessment should be reliable and consistent. This requires clear and consistent processes for the setting, marking, grading, and moderation of assignments and question papers. If a particular assessment is totally reliable, assessors acting independently using the same criteria and mark scheme would come to exactly the same judgment about a given piece of work. In the interest of quality assurance, standards and fairness, whilst recognizing that complete objectivity is impossible to achieve when it comes to summative assessment, it is a goal worth aiming for. Explicitness in terms of learning outcomes and assessment criteria is important in attempting to achieve reliability. Sir, they should be explicit to the students. Principle 6, inclusiveness and equity. Assessment should be inclusive and equitable as far as possible without compromising academic standards. It must be ensured that the tasks and procedures do not disadvantage any group or individual. Principle 7. Assessment should be an integral part of the course design and should relate directly to the learning outcomes of the course. 8th principle. Transparency. Explicit, accurate, consistent, and timely information on assessment tasks and procedures should be made available to the students. 9. Manageability. The scheduling of assignments and the amount of assessed work should provide a reliable and varied profile of achievement without overloading staff or students. Then principle 10, timely feedback, very important. It promotes learning and facilitates improvement. Students are entitled to feedback on submitted formative and summative tasks. The nature, extent, and timing of feedback for each assessment task should be made clear to students in advance. Now, sir, we must do alignment of assessment with learning outcomes. Most important. That is actually learning outcomes based assessment. We must do it at subunit level. That means independent topic in a unit covered in 3 or 4 hours. Then unit level or module, some universities call it module. Then course level at all the 3 levels. The assessment questions must be prepared in such a way that in every mode of assessment, whether you call it MCQ, short answer questions, quizzes, long answer questions, case studies, problems. Every question must be mapped with one of the learning outcomes. And justice must be done to all the LOs based on the content taught till the assessment is made. Now let us see the mapping of assessment questions at subunit level. Let us assume that there are two LOs at subunit level. Therefore, there should be two questions. Question 1, mapping with subunit level learning outcome 1. Question 2, subunit mapping with subunit LO 2. Each question may consist of as many parts as the teacher thinks appropriate. 2 parts, 3 parts even. At different cognitive levels, including remember level. But all the parts of the question must be mapped with the same learning outcome. Another important point, sir. Formative assessment is generally done at subunit level and not included in grading. Therefore, there need not be any choice in the question paper. Now let us see mapping of assessment of questions at unit level. Let us assume that there are 4 LOs at unit level. So there should be 4 questions, each question mapping with one unit level learning outcome. Here also, teacher may include subparts of each question at different cognitive levels, including remember level. But again, all parts of the question must be mapped with the same learning outcome. If he or she wants to give choice, it may be given under each learning outcome, sir. This way, choice must be given this way, in such a way that the learning outcome is achieved even if the student answers either of the questions in the choice. We must now consider the cases where more than one unit, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units are considered for assessment in the mid-semester examination especially. Because some courses consist of 6 units, 7 units, 8 units I have seen in different disciplines. I have seen that. So let us consider the case 1 in which there is a continuity of knowledge from one unit to the next unit in the course. In such cases, one may consider the learning outcomes of higher standard of the subject at different cognitive levels, including remember level, in the question paper setting. It means if the student has achieved these LOs, it is understood that he or she has achieved the LOs of all the units. Case 2. Each unit in the course has a different topic. In some of the courses, they are designed like this. There is no continuity of knowledge from one unit to the next unit. In such cases, the LOs of higher standard of the subject content of each unit at different cognitive levels, including remember, must be considered for question paper setting. So the question paper should be carefully set, sir, very important note, carefully set in order to test whether a student has achieved the minimum level of each of the learning outcomes to enable him to pass the course. Now, mapping of assessment of questions at course level, for example, 6 LOs. There should be 6 questions, each question mapping with one course level learning outcome. Here also, each question may consist of different parts as the teacher thinks, but in every question, there must be more than one cognitive level, including remember level, right? It's very important. But all the parts of the question must be mapped with the same learning outcome. Again, the choice, the same case as we discussed earlier. Under each course learning outcome, there must be choice. Now, conclusion. The principles of assessment must be followed in order to do justice for the purpose of assessment. Every faculty member must develop expertise in formulating learning outcomes and set questions in alignment with learning outcomes. Learning outcomes based assessment must be followed by every faculty member as it motivates the students to put in necessary effort to achieve the learning outcomes. The faculty members can easily calculate the attainment level of each of the learning outcomes by the students if they follow learning outcomes based assessment. Sir, this is necessary for accreditation of any academic program by National Board of Accreditation. Thank you very much.